this last discussion. Going to start off with a little bit of controversy, beat maybe. Moving on. I'd like to introduce our panel and then just kind of get right to the discussion. We're going to be talking today about finding veteran talent through apprenticeships and sort of skills-based hiring practices. So starting to my right is Laura Smigel. She is currently the Senior Vice President for Strategic Partnerships at Orion. She has been prior to this, with Booz Allen Hamilton you're the head of military and veterans affairs with them, and also has been a chairman of the board at Blue Star Families. Next is Juan Palaso. She is the former special assistant to the Undersecretary of Defense and the chair of the CFANY Veterans Roundtable. After that, my friend Steve. Steve is a 20-year military veteran, retired, and now works as the talent attraction manager for Spectrum out of the Charlotte branch. And finally, we have Ann Trinkle. She is the executive director for Helmets to Hard Hats, specifically here in New York City. And she has a lot of expertise in bringing veterans into the construction sphere here in New York City. So the general thrust of this conversation is going to be how we utilize a variety of apprenticeship programs, both within and without of our companies, to kind of bring in veterans from different walks of life. We want to talk about challenges, difficulties that we've encountered in both starting the programs and operating them. And then finally, what successes and triumphs we've experienced and how we would share those with other businesses and how we can get them to take our lessons learned and build on them. So starting with you, Steve, I'm going to ask, when did you at Spectrum first sort of discover the opportunity to start an apprenticeship-based program? What sparked the idea there, and then why do you think it's brought value to you guys specifically?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The program started long before I was there. I was still in the Army when they started it. But it was a culmination of two things. Time Warner Cable, before we acquired them, already had an apprenticeship program. And then Spectrum had its own individual regional programs. So we combined everything together, worked with the Department of Labor and the VA to get certified with both organizations. And then we launched a national program. So now our program for field technicians is a paid apprenticeship program, and it is in all 41 states, and it's for our broadband field technicians.
Okay. I'd like to open that question up to the rest of the panel, maybe Ann, Laura, if you have something to add to that as far as like running an apprenticeship program.
First, I'd like to give a big shout out to all the civilians that are here today, like myself, who are on the right side of the right mission. So Helmets to Hard Hats was conceptualized in 2002. There was a retired Marine Corps general sitting at an event lamenting the fact that there wasn't going to be a workforce going in the future. He happened to be sitting next to the general president for the building trades department from Washington. So they got together and they said, you know what, we can make this work. So they conceptualized a problem, they're solving a problem, and put together a web-based program where veterans could register before they leave the service, after they leave the service. It was really created for post 9/11 veterans. So they would be able to register online and then get directly into the trades. A few of the obstacles they really didn't consider, especially here in New York, we have the New York State Department of Labor, and they regulated and oversaw all the hiring and all the applications, and everything was done with paper. And most of the individuals that were doing the training had rotary phones on their desks. So here I come, and I'm going to tell them we're going to use a computer and we're going to hire people. And they looked at me like I was insane. 20 years later, 3,000 veterans, more than 3,000 veterans working in the trades here in New York, for all New York State, not just the city. And through apprenticeship, I will preach apprenticeship until the day I die as a blue-collar, middle-class entry point. Not everybody's cut out for a desk job. And I think it's just a great opportunity. When our keynote speaker mentioned apprenticeship and Helmets to Hard Hats, a lot of times I feel like it's overlooked as an educational point. And I guess I'm taking up too much time because I'm going to go off on my apprenticeship stuff. But yeah, okay, I'll pass it on down now, let somebody else have some time.
So one of the, it on? Do I need to turn it
Yeah,
on?
yeah, turn it on.
All right. So one of the great things about working for a talent firm like Orion is that companies don't come to us to hire veterans from a DEI perspective. They come to us for a staffing solution, and our candidates happen to be veterans because they're more attractive to these manufacturing, semiconductor, energy firms that we work with. They're just better candidates. So it's been a real treat for me, having worked first on the candidate side with Blue Star Families and Hiring Our Heroes, and then on the employer side with Booz Allen, to talk these companies through why it might be even more advantageous to hire veterans by utilizing some of these government programs. So we have a chance to even consult with companies and talk them through what would be the best program for them and how can they take the most advantage of the tax breaks and grants and the programs that are available to them. So I've been with Orion for a little over a year and a half now, and it's been a real journey for me and for our clients to help figure it out.
Next question, and then one I would hope you could take this on. What challenges, if any, from both within and without of an organization have you seen when trying to start up or open some sort of apprenticeship or skills-based
Yeah,
program?
thank you for that. And I just want to make one quick correction. So my official title when I was at the Department of Defense at the Pentagon is Special Assistant to the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel Readiness, which encompasses all the programs that were discussed today by our good friends here representing the DoD and as well as other areas. So including the military transition program, the TAP, Skill Bridge, force readiness, education and training, which I had the great pleasure of working with, as well as from time to time get to interact with the Honorable Assistant Secretary Rodriguez's team over at Department of Labor, as well as the VA counterparts. And I've been a big fan of ESGR. They do excellent work. And across the board, you see the DoD investing in a variety of apprenticeship credentialing skill-based programs. So as a former naval personnel, I did two transitions. One, transitioning out of the Navy, leveraging my military skill sets, focusing on engineering, because I was an electrical engineer, had my power plant operator apprenticeship certification done. And I thought, hey, look, who wouldn't want to hire someone with this credential who's worked on military installations, worked in the energy area. And then come to find out, like, every state has their own credentialing program. So luckily for me, because I'm from New York, I came back to New York City, got involved with veterans organizations, and fortunately, because of Columbia's program and also 4-Block, which was, I'm alum of the program as well, I got to go to the New York Stock Exchange as their inaugural Veterans Associate program. So that's how I got a start in finance. And unlike, I would say, a lot of sort of manufacturing-based industries, they look at their skills much different than apprenticeship programs. What they have is really similar to on-the-jobs training. And so the credentialing, and some of the folks are here from FINRA today, they know very well in the financial industry. You look for different types of credentialing, like the Series 7, 63. For myself, I didn't have any at the time, but because of the Veterans Network, I was able to finish my degree at Columbia and also transition into what at that point in time was a YMCA retirement fund, which also owns the Armed Forces Foundation on the YMCA side. So, all that saying, there isn't one path, but the credentialing and a apprenticeship program, the skills base, are necessity for you to figure out sort of like where you want to be. But from time to time, you're going to get lucky and going to meet with great people here in the audience to learn about their industry, and obviously the fellow panelists here to learn about their industry to really help you transition. And then, closing out, my second transition was transitioning into the Pentagon, learning about bureaucracy, learning about the budgeting aspect of it, and as well as all the great people and the great programs that are running within DoD and helping people transition. And so if you look at, like, for the Navy, they have Navy Cool credentialing programs, helping people understand what the skill sets are and then matching them to civilian credentials. Like, that's where employers can get a lot of value. And there are military career translators out there to help you at least figure out if you're getting someone from the military based on their MOS, what skill sets do they already have, and then converting that to what career paths could they potentially fit into. But again, coming from an engineering field and then now working in finance, you sometimes don't get that direct translation. But I think that's the value of finding people from the military along with military spouses, because they're diverse, they are agile, and they're willing to do whatever to make ends happen, and really mission focused. So I will stop here, but obviously you have a lot of great experts in the room.
No, thanks. Specifically for those of you who sort of market veterans to companies, and Ann, I know you've got a lot of experience in this, the appetite for establishing some of those more skills-based apprenticeships. It brings a lot of risk to the company because, you have to set up a program where you hope that the candidate will survive the apprenticeship. But what is the, what is the attitude towards that in sort of today's marketplace?
Well, I've been doing this. This is, we're coming up on a 20th year running this program here in New York. And I've been on board. I've had the privilege to be on board since. So in the beginning, there was more of a barrier because it was post 9/11. The unions wanted to hire the veterans, but they also had, they didn't understand when, say, you were getting activated and you're a third-year apprentice and you're going to be gone for 10 months. So now you set back a year. So, well, can he let somebody else go? No, it doesn't work that way. And on the employer side, the company side, looking for project managers, et cetera, everybody was, we want to hire a veteran. And it's like, and that's great. What do you want to hire them for? What skills do they need to have? Are you looking for the veteran who has the college degree to come in? Are you looking for the veteran who's just separated recently and you're going to train him from the ground up? So it's a lot of conversation and really managing people's expectations. We never want to set anybody up for failure, especially veterans. We mentor each veteran. We let them know exactly what they're getting involved with. When you say about surviving apprenticeship, we have excellent retention rates. So hopefully everybody survives every apprenticeship and moves on to be a journey person. And then also too, I don't know if any of you are kind of how connected you are with apprenticeships or aware of how they work. So the veteran is working full time. Their training is on the job, and they're also doing classroom training at the union's expense. So they're getting paid for every hour they work. They don't have any out of pocket for their training. And they're also eligible, because all of these programs are VA approved. They can collect the GI Bill benefits, or BAH, while they're in the apprenticeship program. So in New York, that's a nice chunk of change every month. So really what I guess the answer to the question is, it's always conversation. Computers are great. Nothing will ever replace a human conversation and answering the questions and getting a vibe on people to find out where they want to be, where they think they want to be, versus where maybe is a better fit for them. And like I said, we never want to set anybody up for failure, whether that's a resume that needs to be rewritten, it's an interview skill, we do the whole gamut.
You too?
Yeah.
Sure. So I would say there's a huge appetite, right? I mean, this room is evidence that companies are dying to get into these programs, whether it's SkillBridge, apprenticeships, they've heard the names. And I would say the enthusiasm is very similar to when my husband started hiring our heroes and everybody got interested in hiring veterans. It took a few years for people to figure out, as Ann just said, what veterans, in what roles, what's the right fit. Now, a lot of people are saying SkillBridge, or apprenticeships, but they don't necessarily understand what that means. It sounds free. It's not. It requires that minimum of time commitment, sometimes a significant one. Some apprenticeships are not VA approved. Someone's got to pay for that. And so I think companies just need to do a lot of education to figure out what programs are right for them, for those employees, and be prepared to receive them. On the veteran side, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, everyone goes through TAP, but especially young enlisted who may not be going to college, who may want to take advantage of these programs, they don't always hear about the right ones. I mean, you go to DoD SkillBridge, it's amazing. There are 3,000 companies, but if you're an E4 getting out, there's 3,000 companies. How do you figure out which one? There are improvements being made. James Rodriguez and DOL vets are creating a navigator program so they can talk to the veterans. They point them to approved resources. We're finding ways to get more veterans into these channels. But any company that's interested in bringing on veterans through these programs really needs to do their homework. And then I would recommend partnering with an organization like ANS or getting in touch with DOL to figure out which roles it's best for, because you want to find the right fit so you don't lose that veteran the first year.
Okay. I guess this is for everyone on the panel. What barriers are you seeing as you to dialogue with active service members who are in their transition process? Are you encountering any barriers or sort of any stereotypes against a skill-based, apprenticeship program? Because when everyone hears an apprenticeship program, they think diesel mechanic. At least that's those of us who recently transitioned. That's kind of that was the biggest marketed transition program, was to go be a diesel mechanic. I never would have thought to go work for Spectrum. That was not, that was not what you would think of when you think of an apprenticeship program or a EA to driver or a tech program. So are there stereotypes that we sort of have to wage war against? Are there stigmas? Are there barriers that are on the veteran side of things that are preventing them from, and if so, what? And what do you think we could do about them?
Yeah, so I don't think there's always some kind of bias that as veterans we have to combat. And that comes with education and people being around veterans and understanding who we are, how we operate. As far as for our company, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
So
I completely blanked.
Well, so as veterans kind of approach your programs, what barriers do you see them encountering? What what struggles do they have to overcome on their side to get into your program? And is there something that we can do to sort of mitigate that, or
Yeah, I think it's just educating veterans and transitioning service members about companies, because I've been to job fairs and different hiring events where soldiers will walk by, or airmen, whoever will walk by, and they'll be like, "Oh, Spectrum, your TV and cable. I don't have any kind of education in any of that and no skills for it." I was like, "Well, wait, we do have 9 business units, and each business unit has its own silo of HR and finance and all the different areas." And that usually opens their eyes, and they're like, "Oh, well, tell me a little bit more." Mm-hmm. And a lot of them don't understand what a field technician is. So, once I talk to them about that, and it's usually the lower enlisted that are more eager to do that role, because it's outdoors, in the weather, up on the poles or in somebody's house or underneath their house, depending. So, once we start talking to them about that, they're all about it. As quickly as a position opens up, they're applying and going through the process to join the apprenticeship.
So I guess I should talk about CFA a little bit, which stands for Charter Financial Analysts. And it's an industry credential typically for people who are asset owners, asset managers. So you have your private wealth, large banking institutions, family offices for the ultra high net worth, in addition to pension plans and sort of the sovereign wealth funds. And so it's a credential that's unique to finance. In essence, if you're managing billions of dollars, this is sort of like the creme de la creme of credentials. And then there are alternative investments, so energy, real estate, sort of different, that goes under Kaya, which is a different credential for that. So it's a CFA itself is actually reimbursable through the VA if you want to use your GI Bill to get the certification done. It's a 3-level exam. It's really difficult. We have had MBA graduates who can't even pass this exam, and it's designed to be extremely difficult for all intents and purposes. So there's your bias. A lot of veterans actually don't look into these kind of programs because they're like, well, if regular civilians can't pass it, and I was in infantry or I was in engineering or whatever you name it, blue collar field, finance is definitely not for me. In reality, that's furthest from the truth, because in finance you actually don't even need a bachelor's degree for you to work in finance. Although, if you're looking at some of the top banking institutions, like I shouldn't name them, but your top 7 financial largest banks globally and also domestically, they want, not only a bachelor's degree, they also want someone with a master's degree, right? But, if you're looking at credentialing, if you have a CFA and you have your undergrad, you have some work experience managing portfolio, that's where you're not only getting into finance, but you're working with the best, the brightest asset owners. So a lot of times people think about private equity, or people think about sort of these lucrative jobs when they're pitching like a I don't want to name it, but one of the top CEOs of American banking institution whose representative is here today. I'm looking at you, but we'll call your CEO out. But like individuals like that, and veterans don't aspire to some of those roles, and partially because they're starting out already later in the civilian career field. But it's these kind of self-limiting biases that exist. And we have had plenty of veterans who passed the CFA, who work in financial institutions, who are doing amazing things. But kind of just, again, throwing out some of these assumptions that you have to have X, Y, and Z in order to work in a particular field, or, that's just a barrier that you think exists. I'm hoping most veterans will kind of throw that away, because if you look at programs like 4Block, right? I mean, they're amazing. They match with employers, and my company, actually, my day job, which is a French bank, we also sponsor 4Block, because we're willing to bring in veterans who have a number of years working in a very, non-financial environment, but to bring that sort of tenacity, bring that leadership, and bring those skill sets into finance. And you see most of the 4Block graduates, right? They are already getting internships at some of these institutions, and then they'll elevate and graduate from the program knowing that they can achieve whatever they want, because they have mentors through these programs to help them move to the next steps. So I would say, again, credentialing skills, accreditations are important. But as veterans, we have, already $250,000 of, beautiful government taxpayer dollars invested in each and every one of us, because that's how much it takes to train a civilian to become a service member. So all those are encompassed in leadership skills, and even if you didn't go to academy, right, like the military academies. But you work under someone who was trained by those academies. You're learning their values. You're learning their skills, and you work with the best and brightest. And not to mention, work in global dynamics, high risk situations. So skill sets is important. Apprenticeship programs are important. So are internships. But at the end of the day, don't let those stop you from where you want to achieve. And it's okay to switch careers from time to time. I mean, I went from government into finance, into government, back into finance. So, I mean, it's I've worked in nonprofit as well. So, just thinking through, your transition path is not going to be linear. And you should, as employers, as hiring managers, you shouldn't put that assumption on the veterans as well. So that's sort of my tidbit.
Just to circle back to barriers, and from the veteran perspective, when you look at your young men and women in the National Guard, they're young, 19, 20 years old. They do basic training. Now, what are they going to do for a job? So when they get into it, they want to join an apprenticeship. Maybe they have to do 3 weeks of unpaid training. They have to get OSHA certified. They have to get scaffolding. They have to get just the basics to go on any construction site in New York City. So we have a barrier reduction fund that we have received 2 grants for. So we can get them the Metro card. We can get them the work boots. We can get them the clothing, whatever they need, that will just take the onus off them financially for them to show up for the training. They will get a stipend from the union. So we're really trying, and the one thing we've noticed too is if they are actively employed in an apprenticeship program, the retention ratios are better on the Guard and Reserve side, because they have a job, they're committed here, they have the money to get to their weekend drill. It's just so those minor barriers. I mean, that's a whole different level. I'm going very basic here with the young men and women, just for financial standpoint, to help them, get to work every day.
Can I say something a little controversial at the end of the day?
Better.
Get the drinks.
So one barrier that we've seen is the fact that, with the best of intentions, the GI Bill was created to favor 4-year or 2-year degrees. And there was all the best intentions behind this. They wanted to prevent for-profit colleges or fly-by-night programs from taking advantage of veterans, and that's great. But the result is there are vocational programs out there, and some really sorely needed vocational programs out there, that may be GI Bill eligible, but only up to a certain dollar limit, and it's a fraction of what's needed to pay for that training. I'll give you one example. Airline pilots. In the next 10 years, we're going to be somewhere between 200,000 and 600,000 airline pilots short, depending on who you believe in the unions and the associations. And airline pilot training costs around $80,000 total. If you don't do a 4-year degree, which you don't need to, if you go to a vocational program, it covers maybe 25,000 of that. And the veteran is responsible for the rest unless they find some other funding, and there's really no other funding. So I think that one of the barriers is that the GI Bill doesn't always cover vocational programs fully, and that should be explored by the government so that more gets covered and so more veterans can go into these.
Fantastic point. Yeah, that's a fantastic point.
I'll get in trouble for that somewhere.
It didn't used to cover apprenticeship either when they first rolled it out.
That's right.
Yeah, and like I said, kind of just speaking from pretty recent experience, like when you're moving out, the unpaid apprenticeship just isn't really an option, especially when we've talked about how many of our military families are either single income or very often turned over. I can't afford to go back to vocational school for 2 years unpaid, just so I can get a job again. Like a lot of people can't afford to do that. So having that paid option is really strong. We're getting close on time, and I want to leave time for 1 or 2 questions. So just going down the line, Laura, we'll start with you and just go down. If you could tell a company that is interested in starting a sort of a skills-based apprenticeship program, they want to, they're on the fence, they want to take the plunge, what would you tell them to encourage them to do that?
Start with a partner that's doing it already. It takes a very long time to get your program set up internally. Like I said, you need a lot of resources to marshal. Start with the helmets to hard hats, a Heroes Make America, a launch code if you're into cyber, and figure that out. Figure out what roles and what veterans work best, and then you'll get the champions internally. Like someone said in the last panel, you can grow it organically, but start small.
And I mentioned it earlier, it's great to have these programs, but you shouldn't limit it just to that, right? And then additionally, I'm sure Mr. Rodriguez already said this, DOL has funding for apprenticeship programs, so tap into some of those government funding that's made available to you, especially in career fields that are have a shortage of talent pool in the pipelines, right? Like cyber is a huge one. So that's a national security prerogative as well. And then, trucking, if those of you, yourself, right? Trucking is another shortage. So those are typical programs where, if you build it, they will come. But at the same time, also maybe you should survey, right? Your hiring managers, have a discussion with your, senior executives, understanding where their gaps are. And then also, when you're talking about apprenticeship program, it shouldn't replace your own internal training programs, right? Because everybody kind of leans on some of these apprenticeship programs as crutches or credentialing program as crutches. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility, as whether department head or HR, to actually ensure that your talent pool line is ready for the next stage, the future of work. So I think that's just one aspect of it, and that holds true not just for veterans, but holds true for everybody else. Because you're looking at it, well, people are going to move around, people are going to move from company to company, or best case scenario, they stay within your firm. But if you stop educating them and you're relying on these apprenticeship programs to bring them in, fundamentally, they're going to be stagnant at that level. They're going to be unhappy. You might be unhappy, and ultimately you're just throwing money into programs that may or may not make sense. So look at retention policies, look through what makes the most sense, helping mobility growth, and then building a place that feels like it's a inclusive environment and having that sense of belonging. Because otherwise people will leave and companies will poach from you, and we do that in finance. Every firm poaches from each other, and every time they move, right, they get a bigger paycheck, they get a bigger title. So those are the things that, apprenticeship program skill sets may be helpful, but it's not the end all be all.
Yeah, so at Spectrum, the things that we looked at when we started the apprenticeship program or combined everything together when we acquired Time Warner was what roles do we need to sustain our markets? And obviously for us, that's field technicians. They're the ones on the front line. They're in customers' houses. So you have the customer service aspect, you have the functionality aspect. So we, and obviously always plenty of roles open across the nation. So those three things kind of, you know, led us to find that role. So I think finding that role that is easy to implement an apprenticeship program for will help. And then also exploring ways to ensure that it is a paid apprenticeship program. Because when I'm at hiring events, again, you know, I start talking about the apprenticeship program. And I tell them it's a 3-year program. They're like, well, who's going to pay me for the 3 years? I'm like, it's post-hire. So you are already a Spectrum employee before you even enroll in the apprenticeship program. So you receive all the benefits and pay that, you know, that you would normally receive at Spectrum. And you have career progression. You get promoted 3 times at Spectrum through the apprenticeship program. And then it has upward mobility because then you can go to field tech supervisor and so on and so forth. So career progression is also huge.
I'll just say from construction apprenticeship programs within the building trades, the education never stops. Technology changes, green technology, wind technology. There are a bunch of different projects. Everything is very fluid, and your education never stops. Your training never stops. The union is always there. The training center is always open. They offer different classes for different certifications to make sure that you're up to par with the skills that you need to do whatever job is going to come down the pipeline. What I would suggest to any company that is thinking of starting an apprenticeship program, I would say probably pump the brakes a few times. And like any business expansion or when you're going to take on anything, look at your market share. So what kind of apprenticeship are you starting? Who are you going up against? What exists out there? Are you going to be, is it viable for you to put money into this apprenticeship program for your candidates, for your employees? So I would say really just do your due diligence before you take that. It's, you know, it's not a one and done deal. It's a lifetime endeavor for the company. So really just, you know, do your due diligence.
Thank you so much. Sorry, we have about 5 minutes left. So if there are any questions in the audience, now's the time.
Or else we're going to start singing.
All right, go
They
in
have
once.
Chardonnay out there? That's my only question.
All right. Hey, please give a round of applause to our illustrious panel.